The siren blared its third countdown warning. The F-16 at Red Ridge Base sat dead on the runway, like a predator taken down before the hunt. Blake Rourke wiped the sweat from his forehead, trying to hide the panic beneath his spotless uniform. Takeoff was scheduled in 15 minutes. The NATO generals were already in the observation tower, and the lead fighter jet still wasn't responding, mocking the entire tech crew in eerie silence. Nothing worked. It wasn't a missing part. It wasn't a visible failure. It wasn't a reading error. It was just silence. 5 technicians swarmed the F-16, opening panels, running diagnostics, swapping out cables and fuses in a frantic, uncoordinated dance. Blake barked out orders, refusing help from anyone outside his own team. Each second that passed cranked up the pressure. And right in the middle of that rising tension, someone appeared, walking across the runway from the west side, emerging through the shimmering heat above the concrete. An older man, calm steps, khaki pants, faded jacket, a small leather bag clutched in his right hand. "Hey!" Blake shouted, frowning. "Who let this guy through?" No one answered. The man kept walking, steady and deliberate, as if he knew exactly where he was headed. 5 days earlier, that same man had been sitting by a quiet lake in rural Utah, wiping down a rusty wrench with a red cloth. Nathan Cole hadn't worn a uniform in decades. No badges, no medals, no desire for recognition. Long retired, he carried on his shoulders a story he never cared to tell. Back during the most brutal stretch of the Gulf War, he had run the forward repair unit for the American F-16 fleet. A makeshift setup, deep in the desert, with no technical backup, where a pilot's life depended on whatever Nathan could build with his own 2 hands. One night, under enemy fire, he improvised a valve from compression scraps and managed to get 2 jets back in the air, one of them carrying the squadron commander, Douglas Dawson, the man who now held the rank of Air Force General. Nathan and Dawson hadn't seen each other since, but that general's gratitude never expired. Just a week earlier, Dawson had secured clearance to invite his old friend to witness the debut of the newly upgraded F-16s. What he didn't expect was for Nathan to arrive a day early, alone. Back on the runway, Blake had run out of patience. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You need to return to the authorized access point immediately," he said, walking toward the older man with a tone of superiority. Nathan didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the jet, scanning every line and contour of its frame like a craftsman studying his own blueprint. He stopped 3 meters from the nose landing gear and set the leather bag down. "Sir, this is not a sightseeing tour. That aircraft is worth millions. You're interfering with an official operation. I'm ordering you to back away now." Silence. Nathan crouched, opened the bag, and pulled out an old tool, an asymmetrical hand-forged wrench, the kind you don't find in stores. The other techs chuckled. "What's that for, Grandpa? Fixing a bicycle? Or maybe uncorking a bottle of wine?" Blake didn't laugh. His authority was under fire. The old man ignored him. The team was watching. The minutes were ticking, and humiliation was closing in. "All right, you want to be stubborn?" Blake said, stepping forward and grabbing the man by the arm. "You're coming with me. Now." Nathan glanced at Blake's hand, then at his face. He didn't speak, but something in his eyes made the technician hesitate for a split second. That was when Sergeant Paul Hartman, one of the base's senior vets and a keen observer of the flight line, set down his clipboard. He squinted, focusing on the old man's face. A name rose from memory, like dust rising off an old file. "Wait," he said, already reaching for the phone. "Read the name on that bag tag. Now." One of the recruits stepped up and read aloud. "Nathan Cole." Hartman went quiet for a beat. Then he dialed the direct line to command. "Sergeant Hartman here. Flight line sector. We've got a civilian out here. Name, Nathan Cole." On the other end, the general didn't even let him finish. "Cole? Are you sure?" 100%. The reply came fast, one of those that hush an entire room. "Clear the area around him. Now. I'm on my way." If this story is already pulling you in, hit that like button and subscribe, because what's coming next gets even more intense. The sergeant still had the phone in hand when the base-wide radio crackled with a command few people grasped right away. The voice of the operations commander ordered an immediate evacuation of the flight line for all unauthorized personnel and the temporary suspension of any contact with the civilian identified as Nathan Cole. The message was blunt, sharp, but no one yet knew what had triggered such a sudden reversal. On the runway, Blake Rourke let go of Nathan's arm like he'd been shocked. He looked around, confused, searching for someone to confirm whether this was actually serious. But the old man stayed exactly where he was, crouched beside his bag, as if nothing had happened. The jet was still dead, but now, the pressure was coming from above. 23 years earlier, in the rocky desert of Al-Anbar, Iraq, a small team of American engineers operated out of a makeshift hangar wedged between two hills. It was nighttime. The ground trembled under distant artillery. Inside a tent lit by dangling flashlights, Nathan Cole worked on the cooling valve of a damaged F-16 that had just landed with a punctured fuel tank and completely failed brakes. The pilot, dazed and rattled, was then Captain Dawson. He just rescued a medical convoy ambushed by insurgents, but got caught in crossfire on the return. He survived only because Nathan, without modern tools, had reconnected a severed hydraulic line using scrap aluminum from a cannibalized jet. No one ever logged that repair. But that night, a bond was forged, a kind of debt that doesn't fade. Back in the present, while everyone waited for command to arrive, Blake stepped back a few paces and stared at Nathan, still full of bruised pride. He didn't yet know who he was dealing with, but his ego refused to accept that some old man was stealing his authority in front of the whole crew. By now, more techs had started gathering, curious. Some had no idea what was going on. Others whispered theories about the mysterious civilian, but one of them, Technician Ramirez, noticed something different, the way Nathan was watching the jet. He wasn't focused on the lights or the cockpit. His eyes traced the fuselage like someone who knew exactly where each wire ran beneath the skin of the aircraft. "He's not lost," Ramirez murmured. "He's tracing." Up in the tower, General Dawson was finishing a call with the Air Force Security Department. The last time he'd heard the name Nathan Cole was over a decade ago, after a private commendation that Nathan had quietly declined. He never liked spotlights, but now, he was here, unannounced, and alone. The general took the stairs down 2 at a time. Beside him, Base Commander Colonel Jennings was already activating the official escort team. "No one touches him," Dawson repeated. "He knows more about that plane than any of us." Out on the tarmac, Nathan slowly stood up, pulled a key from his bag, and pointed at a metal panel just beneath the nose gear control system. No one understood the gesture. "You shouldn't be here," Blake said, still trying to sound authoritative, though his voice trembled. "You've done enough damage," Nathan finally spoke, calmly, without a trace of sarcasm. "You're looking for a software glitch, but the brain of the aircraft is fine. It's in the nerves. A bypass valve. Lower left side. It's stuck," Blake scoffed. "Seriously? After 3 hours of advanced diagnostics, you think the problem is a forgotten valve?" "I don't think," Nathan said, not blinking. "I know." Ramirez stepped closer. "Blake, I saw where he pointed. That's the auxiliary hydraulic bypass valve. It almost never fails, but if it seizes, it shuts down the main system as a safety measure. Cockpit stays dark. That's not even on the failure checklist," Blake muttered. "Exactly," Nathan said. "Because it only locks after uneven ground cooling, when surface temps go over 120 degrees. You weren't looking for that." The silence that followed was louder than any siren. Blake swallowed hard, and for the first time, he took 2 steps back. At the entrance to the runway, the convoy rolled in with low, rumbling sirens, parting the service vehicles like water. The entire base quieted as everyone recognized the command car approaching. And Nathan? He just adjusted the strap on his bag. Didn't move. Didn't rush. The convoy came to a hard stop just a few yards from the disabled F-16. Dust kicked up by the tires still hung in the air when the rear door of the lead vehicle swung open. The first one out was General Douglas Dawson. What followed was pure silence. So absolute it was as if even sound itself had chosen to hold its breath. Cadets, technicians, even the senior officers watching from the sidelines instinctively took a step back. Dawson's face showed no anger, no urgency. What it did show was something far deeper, silent recognition, a respect so old and profound that it needed no explanation. Nathan didn't move. He stood beside the jet, hands resting calmly at his sides, face composed. His eyes met the general's with the kind of steadiness that erases time. No gestures, no words. Just the unspoken understanding between two men who'd lived through something unforgettable. Blake Rourke, on the other hand, froze. The chest that had once puffed with pride now caved under the weight of something he couldn't define. It was as if the world had tilted and every gaze was now fixed on his mistake, even if no one had said it out loud yet. The general walked up to Nathan, stopping just a step away. In silence, he lifted his hand to his brow and saluted. A real salute. Full, solemn, the kind given only to someone irreplaceable. "Mr. Cole," he finally said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "It's an honor to have you here." The words, though few, seemed to echo across the tarmac. A ripple of whispers spread through the group. The name, once unknown to most, now carried weight. Blake swallowed hard. Part of him wanted to disappear. Another part still searched for a rational explanation for what he was witnessing. The general turned slowly, making eye contact with everyone present. "For those of you who didn't know who you were dealing with," he began, "this is Nathan Cole, field engineer during 3 Middle Eastern campaigns, one of the last living specialists involved in the development of the F-16 since the prototype phase. Some of the tools you use today were designed by him. Some of the procedures in your technical manuals still include his handwritten annotations in the margins. And more than that," he paused, "I'm alive today because this man, alone, repaired a jet with his bare hands in a hangar that wasn't even supposed to exist. No one moved. No one blinked. While others talked about evacuation, he acted and made it work. He didn't ask for a medal. He didn't ask for recognition. He asked for silence. And then he disappeared. So now tell me," he looked directly at Blake, "what kind of madness made us treat him like an intruder?" Blake's legs went weak. His face burned with shame. No apology could ever be enough. Nathan, meanwhile, took a small step forward and placed a hand gently on the general's shoulder. "It's all right, Doug. I came too early. Just wanted to see if these machines still breathe." The general gave a brief smile. "They breathe," he said. "But today, they were holding it in. And it seems like you're the only one who still knows how to make them exhale." Nathan looked at the jet, still motionless, like an animal in hibernation. He walked toward it slowly, knelt down with effort, and pointed again to the valve beneath the nose gear housing. Then, reaching into his bag, he pulled out the asymmetrical wrench, as if holding a living memory, and extended it to Blake without even glancing at him. "Go on, son. It's your turn now." Blake hesitated. For a moment, his fingers hovered over the tool like he wasn't sure he deserved to touch it. But he took it. He walked toward the marked spot with a stiff gait, his face still frozen in disbelief. Nathan stayed crouched, eyes locked on the moment. Ramirez and other techs moved in closer, silent. The F-16, motionless until now, seemed to be waiting for a simple gesture, the right touch, in the right place, from someone finally willing to listen instead of speak. Blake knelt. His trembling hands fitted the wrench to the bypass valve. He didn't apply force, just a precise movement, light as if something in him had begun to understand. The sound that followed was barely audible, a subtle click, followed by a soft hiss of pressurized air escaping. Then, as if the jet itself knew it was free, the internal panels lit up in sequence. Green lights pulsed across the dashboard. The main power system reinitialized, and the cockpit finally glowed, alive, for the first time in hours. Silence gave way to a single sound, the rising hum of the auxiliary power unit spinning up on its own. The F-16 was back, and Blake, kneeling before it, was no longer the same man. The general folded his arms. Ramirez offered a restrained smile, and Nathan simply took a deep breath, as if confirming that something inside him still worked, too. The whole runway watched the scene unfold without saying a word, and yet, what was about to happen next was just the beginning, because the announcement Dawson was preparing to make would change the base forever. The faint scent of fuel and heated metal still lingered in the air when General Dawson turned to Colonel Jennings, who had until then stood off to the side, watching the scene unfold with a mix of respect and unease. Jennings nodded before receiving a single order. He already knew what had to be done. There was no room for formal apologies. Nathan Cole's very presence had already reshaped the unspoken hierarchy of the base. Because out there, at the heart of the runway, protocol no longer led the moment. Experience did, speaking with the weight of a story no one dared to question. Nathan remained near the jet, his fingers slowly brushing across the outer panel like he was reading an old diary. His hand followed the grooves the way someone might recognize an old friend by touch alone. Ramirez approached quietly and offered a clean cloth without saying a word. Nathan accepted it with a subtle nod. Blake Rourke, still on his knees, looked up. The sting of humiliation still clung to him, but now there was something else on his face, a mix of remorse and reverence. When he stood, he walked over to Nathan, held the wrench with both hands, and exhaled deeply. "Mr. Cole, he began, but the words caught in his throat. Nothing rehearsed could express what needed to be said. Nathan looked at him kindly, not with pity, but with the eyes of someone who had once been too young, too proud, too quick to speak. "Take it easy, son. What mattered most already happened. You listened." Blake nodded. For the first time, he truly listened. Not to the engine, but to what the machine, the moment, and even the silence had been trying to say all along. The general stepped into the center of the flight line and called for the cadets, techs, and sergeants to gather around. Light smoke still drifted from the F-16's exhaust, now alive, but no one was looking at the jet anymore. They were focused on the man who had knelt to listen to a problem and stood up with new understanding. "Starting today," Dawson began, his voice steady, "this base will implement a new training protocol. Before any cadet lays a hand on an aircraft, they'll spend 1 week in historical instruction. First class begins tomorrow at 800 hours, and it will be taught by Nathan Cole, if he agrees." Nathan raised an eyebrow, surprised. "It's just a casual talk, General," he said, trying to downplay it. "Then it'll be the best casual talk in this base's history," Dawson replied with a smile. The laughter that followed was modest, but real. The tension had started to lift, but Blake, still feeling unsettled, stepped forward. He needed to make things right. "Sir," he said, his voice firmer now, "I acted like I knew everything. I ignored the signs, disrespected you, and let my pride get the better of me. I have no excuse, only regret. I want to apologize. Sincerely." Nathan crossed his arms, glanced down for a moment, then looked back at the young cadet. He gave a single nod. "You're already forgiven. The moment you listened, that's when it happened." The general turned to the colonel. "Draft a formal letter of apology from the base. I want it delivered in person. And register his name in the technical wing records as a permanent honorary advisor." Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't want a badge, Doug. I just wanted to see if the bird could still fly, and to know that someone out there is still willing to learn from her." "Then take my word instead," Dawson said. "It's worth more than any badge." The group began to disperse. Technicians headed back to their stations. The cadets, still reeling, exchanged quiet glances, but everything had changed. Blake stayed close to Nathan, saying nothing. The two of them stood there a little longer, watching the F-16, listening to the soft hum of the engine in standby mode, and the distant breeze brushing past the hangars. Then Nathan spoke again. "You know what the best part of all this is?" "What?" Blake asked. "That bird only responds when you stop yelling at her." The sun was already sinking low, casting a golden hue across the runway, when Nathan turned and walked calmly toward the lodging quarters. Blake remained behind, frozen in place, still holding the cloth, eyes fixed on the now clean fuselage of the jet that, just moments ago, seemed lifeless. But now it was breathing. And the next day, during the first class of the entire cadet cohort, there would be something unexpected waiting on the instructor's desk. But that, only those in the room would ever know. The technical instruction room at Red Ridge Base had never been so silent. The monitors were off, the laptops closed. Not even the chairs creaked as the cadets sat down, lined up in spotless uniforms, their eyes fixed on the door. At the center of the room, a single light-colored wooden table held a modest object, an old asymmetrical wrench, worn by time. Above it, a small handwritten card read, "Sometimes the problem isn't what's missing, It's what no one's looking at. Nathan Cole walked in at exactly 8 o'clock. He wasn't in uniform, no ID badge, just the same worn jacket from the day before and a leather folder that looked like it had survived wars and storms. Beside him, General Dawson walked with his hands clasped behind his back, wearing the expression of someone who knew he was witnessing something far greater than protocol. Everyone stood the moment they saw them. But with a subtle wave of his hand, Nathan asked them to sit. "This won't be a traditional class," he said, voice low but steady. "I'm not here to teach anything new, just to remind you of what should have never been forgotten." Blake Rourke was in the front row, notebook open, pen in hand, his eyes sharp, his shoulders a bit lower than the day before. He was no longer the confident tech who asserted himself with volume. He was someone now listening with his whole body. Nathan pulled a stack of yellowed pages from his folder. Some had hand-drawn schematics. Others were filled with tiny, fast notes scribbled in the margins. He laid the first sheet on the table and pointed to a diagram of the Block 30 F-16's hydraulic system. "This part here almost never fails," he began. "That's exactly why everyone overlooks it. But when it does fail, everything stops. Same goes for us. Sometimes, what holds everything together is the part no one ever pays attention to." The silence in the room was complete. The sound of turning pages echoed like thoughts shifting in the heads of every cadet. Nathan was talking about mechanics, sure, but beneath his words, something deeper was stirring. He wasn't just talking about aircraft. He was talking about character, about posture, about how listening, really listening, could mean the difference between a safe takeoff and a complete breakdown. "I spent 38 years looking at this jet, and it never lied to me. Because the F-16 doesn't have pride. It doesn't have ego. It just tells you what it needs, if you've got the patience to listen." He looked directly at Blake as he said it, but not with accusation. It was a handoff, a quiet thread connecting generations. After an hour of technical breakdowns, field stories, and analogies tying components to character traits, Nathan closed his folder and crossed his arms. "Now I want to hear from you." Ramirez was the first to raise his hand. "Mr. Cole, why didn't you ever write a book?" Nathan laughed. "Because people who write books sometimes have to pretend they've figured it all out. And I'm still learning." The laugh that followed was light, genuine, and in that moment, Blake raised his hand too. "Do you still carry that tool with you, sir?" Nathan pulled the wrench from his jacket and laid it on the table next to the card. "Always. Not because it's magic, but because it reminds me where I came from and what I can't afford to forget." At the end of the class, General Dawson stepped forward. In a brief speech, he announced that Nathan Cole's name would be added to the base's historical records as an honorary technical advisor. But more than that, a permanent space would be created in the maintenance hangar bearing the inscription, "Here, even silence teaches." And beside it, that wrench would be displayed as a symbol of everything manuals can't measure. The class rose to their feet in applause. Later that same day, Blake found Nathan sitting in a lounge chair at the base mess hall, sipping coffee alone. He walked over with 2 cups in hand, set one down on the table, and stood there for a moment, unsure if he should sit. Nathan tapped the empty seat with his palm. "Sit down, son. Today coffee's on you." Blake sat. It wasn't about apologizing anymore. It was about learning. "Do you think I can still become a good technician, sir?" Nathan looked out the window, where the now warm F-16 was being towed back into the hangar. "You already started, Blake. What matters now is what you do with what you heard." They sat there, unrushed, sharing the silence like a secret code, a conversation that didn't need more words. Because that day, at Red Ridge Base, a jet came back to life. But the ones who truly changed were those who learned to listen. If this story moved you, share it. Drop a comment about the moment that hit you the hardest, and check out the next video that's about to pop up on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It means the world to us.